All right, my name is Brandon Hanson. I'm the one that's been emailing you pretty consistently. I'm joined by a couple people. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Tupper, a student here at Iowa State.
I'm Caleb Finnegan, student at Central College.
Yep. And basically our mission today is just talk about the state officer selection process. We have 7 people on right now. We'll wait just a couple minutes to get started. Or if there are any questions that you have right away, go ahead and drop those in the chat box on the side, and maybe we can answer those before we go to. So,
yeah, if the chat box doesn't seem to be working for you, you can post them in the Facebook group as well, or you can send them to us via email because they should have our
yep, you should have our email and our phone numbers now because they can text us.
Yeah. So any medium works. We'll be monitoring them all, and at any course throughout the entire evening. If you have questions, just shoot them our way, and we will answer them as we get to them, or we'll stop what we're doing and we'll answer them. But we'll make sure that all the questions do get answered. I feel like we should have some Jeopardy music in the background.
Jeopardy music, yeah.
But
you got any tunes we can play before we get started?
Doubtful, but we can see what the old Spotify has. Go all workshop on this. I'm sure the audio through your computer, through my phone, will be
pristine.
Excellent.
Alrighty, it's 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you to those of us, or those of you rather, that are available to join us this evening. Like I mentioned in the Facebook post and the email, the goal tonight is really just go throughout the entire state selection process, which we'll just refer to as SOSP, basically throughout the duration of this webinar and then throughout the times of your interviews. But we'll just, like I said, go through that. We'll have the opportunity for you guys to ask questions. Don't be afraid to drop any questions that you may have about a specific thing right in the chat box. You can also text them to us. We dropped our phone numbers right there. If you want to do that anonymously, we can do that too. So just let us know. But with that, otherwise, we'll just go ahead and get started. So so if you have technical difficulties, you can talk to me. There's our stuff. If you need to contact us, then I'll go to the next slide, Tub, which is really just congratulations. So thank you all for having an interest in running for state FFA office. Know that I probably speak for the 3 of us here saying that the amount of effort that's put into a year of service like state FFA is really needed by the organization, but it's something that you probably wouldn't give up or trade for anything else. So we appreciate that. Moving on, it's just another note about questions that we talked about. And now we get into the meat. Tupper, you want to go ahead and talk about the steps?
Yeah, you bet. So as most of you will know, via the state officer candidate handbook. Thank you. That you all have had access to in this time running up to state officer interviews. You know that there's a certain amount of steps that you go through in order to be a part of this process. So obviously, step one, get your application filled out. You all have done that. Step two is what is upcoming now in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Next week. I'm getting my weeks off. Next week, we'll do interviews at the FFA Enrichment Center. That will consist of personal round one, multiple choice test, writing exercise, one-on-one interview, round robin interview, advocacy stand and deliver, and then a personal round two interview. So that'll all happen next week. And then we get to convention, which is steps 3 through 7. The ballot, it will be announced during the business session at State FFA Leadership Conference. Candidates will then be able to give a 2-minute speech. Candidates will answer 2 questions as well on stage in front of their voting block. So if you're slated for a secretary or reporter position, it'll be in front of the entire delegate body, since those are at-large positions. If you are slated for a vice president position, that will be in front of your district, since those are district elected positions. Votes are cast and the election results are counted and finalized to make sure that there were no ties or anything of those natures. And then from there, the results are sealed until the last session, when they are then announced during that final session on Tuesday afternoon, right at the end, right before we wrap up State FFA Leadership Conference.
Caleb, you want to talk about our interview timeline?
Yep. So our interview timeline is Wednesday, April 10th, and then Thursday, April 11th. So we'll start at 8:45 a.m. on the 10th, and then we'll wrap up on just afternoon on the 11th, that Thursday. And so the whole time you'll be the attire's official dress. So you'll be in official dress the whole time while you're at the enrichment center in the holding room. So just come prepared with that. Come with everything you need for official dress.
Awesome. So now we'll move on to things that are touched on in the State Officer Selection Process Workbook. So that's available at ioffa.com underneath the State Officers tab, and we'll just kind of work through that a little bit. So what I'm on here is slide number 9, which just talks about personal growth questions. So overall, when we're talking about personal growth questions, it's really just call it maybe a format that that the nominating committee will use to try to assess your skills, the 5 different competencies, which we'll have next. The idea is to, for you as a candidate, is to talk about how you've grown through FFA, and example questions are listed in the workbook. So if you have any specific questions, we can go forward on that. Tupper?
Yeah, so around those personal growth questions, basically what we're trying to do is evaluate candidates on, the nominating committee will be evaluating candidates on 5 different, what we call competency areas. So it revolves around you, and then the 5 different areas of influence, communication, team player, character, and knowledge. We believe as a nominating committee and throughout this process that these 5 areas of core competency are all of equal importance to somebody being elected and serving as a state FFA officer. So each one of these 5 areas is worth 20% of your overall nominating committee score that will be evaluated throughout the 2 days of you being in Ankeny at the State FFA Enrichment Center. So those 5 areas are really what we speak to when we talk about personal growth, and that is what the nominating committee will be evaluating on.
All right, so our first competency, we're going to talk about each 5 in depth here a little bit. So the first one's communication, and like Tupper said, all these are worth 20%. So that's why the 20% is on the slide. So essentially, the communication, we're looking we're looking for you to demonstrate the effective use of various forms of communication, whether that be nonverbal, listening, written, speaking, and then your ability to convey a message in both large group and one-on-one settings. So this competency will be pretty big in the advocacy stand and deliver for your communication of kind of the hot topic that was chosen, and then it'll come into play for the writing the letter.
Writing practicum.
Yep, the writing practicum that you'll have to do.
Absolutely. So team player is the second competency that's worth 20% of your overall score. When we're talking more specifically about team player, it's how would you interact within a group, regardless of size, regardless of demographics. It's not just necessarily you working on an FFA officer team. It could be how are you a team player just in everyday life, because we want to basically assess your entire body. So we talk through a couple things here. So demonstrates the ability to work in a team setting. Values of diversity of opinion is a big one, and then trying to pull out different parts here. Seeing the big picture, vision is a part of being a team player. So these things will be assessed basically throughout the rounds. That mostly the nominating committee is asking you questions. That's a little bit harder to assess team player, maybe something like a stand deliver, where it's just you giving a speech in front of a panel of judges. So this one will mostly be picked out of the interview rounds.
The next area that we want to talk about is areas of knowledge. And one thing I will mention about all these different areas that I should have earlier is that throughout each portion of your interview rounds, there are times when we are better able to evaluate different competency areas, but that doesn't mean that each competency area won't be evaluated in every round. So what I'm saying is there's not particular rounds that are going to show your competency areas. Every single round will have a facet of that competency area woven into it, but there's just rounds that are in particular better suited to evaluate different things. So with areas of knowledge, we have the knowledge exam that will be taken. Obviously, the knowledge exam is a very heavily weighted towards the area of knowledge competency area because it's directly testing your knowledge. But that's not meaning that areas of knowledge won't be evaluated throughout other parts of the interview process as well. So speaking to areas of knowledge, it talks about demonstrating your ability to articulate issues within the food, fiber, and agricultural and natural resource issue areas, FFA, and kind of your broad understanding of relevant issues that are happening throughout the industry. So as you'll know in your handbook, we give different hot topic areas of FFA, agriculture, and agricultural education. And under those hot topic areas, we give two hot topics under each one of those. That really will help guide and direct you in your ability to understand the relevant issues to those three separate areas. And really, that's what we're making sure you have a basic understanding of when it comes to your ability to process through new information and show a high level of competency when it comes to being able to talk about issues relevant to FFA as an organization.
All right, next we have character. So this one should be pretty self-explanatory about what the nominating committee is looking for, but we're just looking for a display, or that you display a disposition that is genuine, responsible, honest, mature, confident, respectful, and that you have a positive outlook on life. So most of the times this will be evaluated based on how you answer questions, or kind of the way you answer questions and the stories you convey to the nominating committee and the examples you use.
And our final competency is influence. So influence can, what I would say is one of the competencies that could probably more appropriately be evaluated across any type of interview, whether it's trying to convince a panelist on the stand deliver about a certain whether you're taking a stand on a certain topic or stand deliver. It can come up when we're talking about, maybe you're asked a question in a one-on-one interview that's, tell me about a time where a younger member looked up to you. What impact did you have on them? So it can really be evaluated all over the place. The way we define influence, just picking out a couple of things from our PowerPoint slide, displays personal attributes that are courageous and passionate while carrying out the FFA mission. Demonstrates the ability to influence each other through modeling expectations. So like I said, really just a variety of things through this competency.
So now we'll dive a little bit deeper into each one of the rounds that we will be evaluating you all on here in the upcoming weeks. So round one is what we call the personal round one. That's kind of redundant the way I just said that. But personal round one has between 3 and 5 questions. You'll get 6 minutes in this round. And this interview is what we call 1 on 12. So the nominating committee is made up of 12 members, 2 members from every district in the state. And in this interview round, all 12 of those members will be in the room, and they will all be evaluating you on the answers that you give. The purpose of this is to really get to know the goals that you have, whether it's within FFA, whether it's within life, and then kind of just the motivations and the desires that you have about this organization and why you want to be in a position like this. Just like any good interview, some of the best advice we give is you want to make sure you give a good first impression. You want to make sure that the nominating committee understands who you are right off the bat, and remembers who you are as well. Because these are putting your best foot forward is going to really help them be able to evaluate you better throughout the entire interview process. So and then the other tips that we have is just continue to practice those questions that we pose in the state officer candidate workbook, and be comfortable with answering those.
All right, so the second round that you will go through is a multiple choice test. This test consists of 30 questions, and you have 30 minutes to complete the test. It will be done on a computer using Kia, so it's not on paper. So the computer will grade it. And then kind of the purpose is to evaluate your basic understanding of issues and facts related to agriculture in the field. So some tips that we have are study the suggested reference list of resources. I know that's on the website. There's like 100 facts on it, and those 30 questions will come straight from those 100 facts.
About that. All right, next one, the writing exercise. So this would be also a good time to bring up that there are quite a few candidates that are running for state office. So you may see round 2, which was the multiple choice test, be your first round that you do while you're a candidate, because you're split up in 2 groups, which are Group A and Group B. So we kind of set these things up in I'll call them blocks. So block 1 would be round 1 and round 2. Round number 3, which is our writing exercise, will be a part of basically the second block that you're doing. So you'll have one topic, you'll have 45 minutes to complete the writing exercise, and the purpose is just to evaluate your ability to convey knowledge and understanding via writing. So when you're a state officer, you're going to be required to send probably thousands of emails. You'll be required to, maybe write a press release for a proficiency award. There's a variety of things that you can be required to do that require the ability to write fluently. So we want to be able to assess this in the SOSP.
Round 4 is what we move into. We call it the one-on-one round. We affectionately call it speed dating. So basically what this round does is that you'll do a series of 12 interviews, 1 interview with each individual nominating committee member. That nominating committee member will ask you 2 to 3 questions, and you'll have only 3 minutes in this 3 minutes with each individual nominating committee member in this round. Normally it's in one of the large conference rooms in the FFA Enrichment Center, and the nominating committee is just spread out throughout the edges of the room on 12 different chairs. You get 3 minutes with them. They call time. You go to the center of the room. They get a little bit of time to do their evaluations. You're able to then go to the next person. They'll call time again, and then you can start the next conversation. And then you'll just rotate throughout the entire room. And once you've done all 12, you can then exit. This is another really great place for you to get to know a nominating committee member on a little bit more personal level, and really be able to interact with them, because they're able to the nominating committee will choose questions more so individually for this round,
right.
Which allows them to maybe choose a question that they're kind of passionate about as a committee member. So being able to have that time with them to answer to something that they think is really important can really provide a lot of insight for that committee member on what your motivations are as a person as well. So once again, study those questions that the example questions in the handbook, and get used to that 3 minutes time frame of answering questions so that you don't run out of time, and you're able to effectively answer all the questions that are posed by that committee member.
All right, so round number 5 is round robin. You will complete this twice. You'll have 2 different conversations. You'll have 2 minutes to prepare. You'll be given kind of the prompt with the overarching theme on it. You have 2 minutes to prepare, and then you'll carry on a 5-minute conversation with an industry representative. And so kind of the purpose of this is to evaluate your ability to carry on that conversation with a person about a topic related to agriculture. So some tips that we have, we want to remind you guys that it's not a speech round, it is a conversation. So make sure that whoever you're having the conversation with is interacted in on the conversation, and you're not just talking the entire time. And then study and research the hot topics, and be able to have a general conversation about it. And why this is important is because as a state officer, you'll be interacting not only with agriculture experts, but just people with all different backgrounds, and we're trying to get a look into how well you can convey a message about agriculture in a short amount of time.
Awesome. So I'll talk about advocacy stand deliver, but real quick, I'll just throw it out. Make sure if you have any questions right along the way, if you're writing those down, don't be afraid just to send those to us via text, via Facebook, or just put them right there in the chat box, and we'll try to collect those again as we continue to move throughout the webinar. Next, we're talking about advocacy stand and deliver. So this would be 20 minutes to prepare, just a minute speech, followed with 5 minutes of questions. That usually it's 2 to 3. It could be more. Just kind of depends what the panel decides. So similar to the round robin, you'll have experts about the hot topics that are evaluating you, or excuse me, in the round robin, they're not evaluating you, they're just talking to you. But in this case, you won't be talking to them. They'll be evaluating basically your knowledge of the actual topic instead of carrying on a conversation. So you'll be giving a speech to them. It's just going to evaluate how you verbally convey a message in front of a group or crowd. So as a state FFA officer, you may be asked to give an address, a lot of banquet speeches. There'll be numerous times where you're asked to get up in front of a group and speak to a certain topic, whether it's related to FFA, agriculture, or ag education. So tip, again, study and research the hot topics. Practice, maybe have your FFA advisor give you a prompt, and then have 20 minutes to prepare, and then actually try and give a speech on whatever that prompt was. If I think there are actually additional resources online that have to do with the Extemporaneous Speaking Career Development event. That's really similar to what this round is all about. It's almost identical to the CDE. So.
And that brings us to our last round, which is personal round 2. Personal round 2 is very similar to personal round 1. It's a 1-on-12 interview, 3 to 5 questions, but this time you'll have up to 8 minutes to answer those questions. And more so the purpose of this round is to kind of tie a bow on your entire interview process, and really leave the nominating committee with that last essence of who you are as a person, and what your motivations are for running for state office. Kind of that last chance to show them what your character is, what your passion for success is, and how you go about influencing those around you in a positive manner. So same sort of advice and tips that we gave you for the one-on-one interviews and for the personal round 1. Personal round 2 is just a very similar format.
You want to talk about our hot topics? Okay.
Yeah, I'll do a quick overview. So you all should have the hot topics in the handbook for just a real quick overview. So for American agriculture, the first hot topic is the impact of international agriculture and trade within the Iowa's agricultural industry. And then the second one is how agriculture progresses through the demands of consumers, niche markets, and other trends within populations. So kind of that, how does agriculture interact with the general public, and how does it kind of navigate through its ability to provide to the general public what the general public needs from agriculture. As far as agricultural education goes, the first hot topic is the basic principles in the Perkins funding and CTE funding in the state of Iowa. And then the second one is the barriers to agriculture, teacher retention, recruitment, and general support for agriculture within education classrooms. So these two are very hot topics in the state of Iowa. Agriculture teacher retention is a very big issue. We have not only a shortage of ag teachers, but we also have a lot of ag teachers that don't stay past 5 years teaching within the profession. And then federal Perkins dollars is a very important, the most important way that CTE or career and technical education is funded from a federal level. And it really allows FFA and agricultural education to operate effectively within not only the state of Iowa, but also the United States. And then our last area, FFA, the two hot topics there are FFA's role in preparing students for careers in small scale and large scale agriculture. So really, how does FFA better prepare students to just take a position once they get done with either high school or with their secondary education in college? So what sort of skills and abilities are students getting from FFA, whether it's within a CT that's very technical, like soils judging or that sort of thing, or whether it's more leadership and soft skills based. So those general tie up of the concept there with what FFA does in preparing students. And then the second one is FFA's commitment to providing a diverse and inclusive environment and opportunities for all students to succeed. So how are we as an organization within FFA doing a better job of making sure that we have open access to all the opportunities that FFA is provided, no matter what background the student is coming from?
Oh, tough, bro. I think we had a question about the Perkins.
Yes.
So Lauren Moser asked, how in depth should we familiarize ourselves with Perkins 5 since it's got a lot of content?
That's a good question. So I think the purpose of these hot topic areas is to get you exposed as a candidate to the areas that we deem as important within our organization. So we don't expect you to know everything. I wouldn't be able to tell you everything about Perkins 5 funding right now off the top of my head. But knowing that you took the time to research into how FFA and agricultural education is funded, and what have been the beginnings of the Perkins funding, how it has evolved, and then where we would like to see Perkins funding into the future as it relates to trying to modernize career and technical education. I think those are the big themes that we really want state officer candidates to come away with from these hot topic areas. It's not so much about the nitty gritty details. Those are good, but the general theme behind the importance of Perkins funding is really what we're going for here.
Right. I would add on to that by saying so this hot topic can be assessed through a variety of rounds. Let's say, for example, that this hot topic were to be assessed through round robin 1 or round robin 2. When you're talking to an industry professional about the federal Perkins money, you could say, well, when I was running for state FFA office, I learned all these things about federal Perkins funding. Federal Perkins funding, excuse me. Kind of make a joke out of it because in that scenario, you are a state FFA officer and you're interacting with the individual.
Yeah.
So maybe that's how you talk about that, I guess.
Yeah, and I will mention within areas of knowledge as a competency area, one thing we do evaluate is the ability to conduct effective research, which is part of the reason why we have these hot topic areas anyway, so that you have to go out on your own and research these topics so that you can become better familiarized, so that you can feel comfortable in having a conversation about these things. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that answered your question.
Awesome. Again, if you have any more questions, feel free to drop them there. Next, we'll talk about 60/40, Caleb.
Yep. So 60/40, if you were at the SOC workshop in January, we touched on it a lot. But essentially what this means is think of kind of your overall score as like 100%. So 60% of that is decided by the nominating committee, and then the other 40% is decided by the delegate body. So once you're done with your interviews, 60% of your score is determined, and then if you make ballot and you give your speech, the delegates will kind of make up the other 40%. So however they vote will split up the 40%, and then however the scores compared, if I'm balloted against Brandon, however our scores compare, like that ratio is divided up. The 60% is divided up based off both your guys' scores, and then the 40% is divided up by kind of the delegate vote there. So it can be kind of confusing, but just kind of know that 60% is nominated from your nominating committee score, and then the other 40% is from the delegate body.
Awesome. We have a good question from Noel that talks about the research materials that were allowed. So I did mention earlier that the stand and deliver is really similar to the extemporaneous speaking round. This is one place where it is a little bit different. So you'll have the opportunity to look at those resources. You can keep them with you when you are in. So let me think about this. So you'll be in a holding room before you're taken to a place called the prep room. So in that holding room, you'll be basically with other candidates waiting to get pulled for your prep time for the stand deliver. In that area, you can have kind of whatever materials you want. We'll restrict them a little bit so you're not communicating with people that have already taken the stand deliver. But for the most part, you'll kind of have freedom to kind of look through whatever you want, whether it's reading a book, working on homework, or researching those hot topics. Once you're taking into the prep area, you won't have those with you. It'll just be you. You'll have the opportunity to maybe write some things down if you want. Try to formulate how you're going to go throughout your speech. You'll have a piece of paper that lays out the entire prompt. So one thing to note is that the prompt itself is not just a hot topic. It may say you've been tasked with giving an address at the annual governor's something about the importance of Perkins funding, yada yada. Speak for 3 minutes on the issue and make sure to touch on this, and this. So then that's what basically you'll be tasked with, but you won't have any materials with you to do that.
And another thing to bring up with that is when you're in the stand and deliver room, we'll give you note cards and paper for you to map out ideas, write out your speech if that's how you operate. But once you leave that room, all the materials that you utilize within that room, as far as the scratch paper, getting your thoughts in order, that sort of thing, have to stay in that room. So you're not allowed to have, note cards or a piece of paper or something like that. It truly needs to be an extemporaneous speech, something that isn't written out for you to be able to operate like that, which is a challenge in itself. But it's one of the reasons why that's such an important round of practice ahead of time, so you can get comfortable with developing those ideas, but yet not having the paper right in front of you to be able to use as a resource.
Yep. And then I see the second part of your question talks about what prep materials what you have for the round robin. So similar to the stand and deliver, you'll have those materials with you in a holding room. You can kind of look at those, and that's fine. Once you're pulled, you'll most likely receive the prompt right outside of the door that you're going to go in. So you'll have the opportunity to read that prompt basically in the hallway. You'll have 2 minutes to collect your thoughts on what you want to say in the conversation with the industry professional. Then you'll go inside the room, and you'll basically just start carrying that conversation. So introduce yourself as Brandon Hanson, FFA officer, and then you'll just go kind of right into it. They may ask a question. They may ask you to kind of lead that conversation. It could be different. That's one important thing to note, is that it could be different from one round robin room to the other, based off the expert. So awesome. Good questions. So that pretty much takes up most of the material that we have planned for talking about this evening. Now what we'd like to do is maybe leave it open for just a couple more minutes. You can ask questions that relate specifically to the things we talked about. If there's anything you feel like we haven't covered adequately, we can go back to that. Additionally, if you have any personal questions for us, we've been through this process. Tupper and I were on a task force that had the opportunity to remake some of this process last year. When we ran, there were 8 competencies, and then we fizzled those down to 5. So any questions that you have, be it personal or not, go ahead and drop those in. But otherwise, we'll wait maybe a couple of minutes for for those that still have them. Additionally, on the last slide, that just gets back to our contact information again. Feel free to contact us directly. We have our phone numbers there, and then also our email addresses. So.
But that is all the delivered content that we have. So like Brandon said, we'll stay online for probably 3-4 more minutes. So go ahead and get those questions in. But we do want to thank you all for, once again, attending this webinar tonight and for going through with this process. So it's a big responsibility, not only to run for state FFA office, but it's also an enormous responsibility to be elected for state FFA office. And being able to impact the over 15,000 Iowa FFA members that there is. It's an extremely humbling process and allows for a lot of self-reflection. And we hope that you all experience that as you go through preparing, interviewing, and then as some of you will eventually become state FFA officers as well.
Absolutely. And maybe while we wait for the 3-4 minutes, maybe I have a question for you guys. What kind of led up to your decisions to run for state FFA office?
You want to go first?
Put me on the spot here.
Yeah.
So for me, I ran for district office when I would have been a sophomore in high school. I did not get elected district office when I ran as a sophomore, which for me that was one of the first times I really hadn't won something that I attempted to do, and I used the term "won" in that case because that was the mindset that I was in. It was just something else that I was going for because I thought that that's what I needed to do, and that process in itself maybe do a lot of reflecting and really offered a much larger spirit of humility as well. So I had to reevaluate the reasons for me running and try and steer me towards those less selfish reasons, which I did. And then I was able to run for district office again. The following year, I was able to get elected, and that was a really fulfilling experience. And I was able to get a mentor who ended up being the individual, Tony Mullers, who had beaten me for district office the year before that, and then was elected state office when I was a district officer and was my district president. So through those sorts of relationships, I was able to grow and develop. And then when it came around to running for state office, I really believed that I had talents and abilities that would be able to benefit all of Iowa FFA. And I was willing to give of myself, give of my time to the organization because I thought it was a worthwhile cause to be able to give of myself to. I had other opportunities that I could have pursued, and I would have pursued had I not been elected. And I think that's the important thing to remember is I went into running for state FFA office with a mindset of it's not if I'll serve, it's just where I'll serve. I knew I was going to serve agriculture, student voices in some way, shape, or form. It just was a matter of whether I was going to do it continuing in a blue corduroy jacket or if I was going to be putting on a different jacket, different hat, and moving forward. Yeah, exactly. So that's really where I was at. It was more of a, this is who I am. The nominating committee deems me as being someone they feel can impart some sort of talent, I guess. Maybe they made the wrong decision, but if they can impart some sort of utilization of their abilities to help benefit the organization, then I was going to offer myself for that. And if they thought somebody was better, then that was a decision that I was going to be okay with as well.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah.
I kind of had the same path as Michael. My sophomore year, I didn't run for district office, and I vividly remember sitting in my Ag 2 class, and Mr. Calvert, it was kind of like last day, turn in your district officer app, and Mr. Calvert asked if anybody else wanted to do it. And, I was sitting there and I was like, man, I think I really want to do that, but I was shy at the time and didn't raise my hand, didn't say anything. So then, like that day forward, I just had to sit there and watch what that district officer team did. And kind of my junior year, when it came time to turn in an app, I was one of the first ones to turn in an app for my chapter. And then everything just kind of snowballed from there. After that experience, I was really looking forward to that. I was lucky enough to get elected to that. And then throughout that experience, I was very fortunate to be blessed with some good district officer teammates, and had some good role models to look up to on the state level from the year prior and then the current year. And so everything just kind of snowballed together and kind of led to the same reasoning that Tupper had, like, this is who I am as a person. If I'm kind of the right fit for this job, then great. And if not, like, there's going to be somewhere else out there for me to serve. So that's
Thanks, Caleb.
kind of my reason.
Yeah, I guess talking about my journey a little bit, I started ag class a little bit late. I wasn't really directly involved in FFA, but it was my FFA advisor that forced me to do my first career development event, which I'm sure has happened to a few of us. But inevitably from that, it was about a year after that, he had the opportunity for me to run or he told me about the opportunity to run for district office. I went through that, had no expectations about me even getting balloted. I was scared out of my mind as I was sitting in the holding room getting ready to go and interview. But I ended up getting balloted, ended up getting it, ended up going to WLC the summer after that, and then had the opportunity to actually serve the association as a delegate at national convention. And then from there, I just knew that I wanted to serve the association in a different capacity, which was running for state office. So next, we have a question that's been sent in that talks a little bit or asks about the round robin. It says, will we do the two conversations back to back? So earlier I mentioned how we do things kind of in blocks. So you're in a holding room, you go and do this round, and then you get put in a holding room after that. So for I guess our first example had to do with I think it was knowledge chess was first in personal round 1. So you kind of do you do that, and then group A and group B will switch, and then you do those round robin 1 or round robin 2 or round robin A and round robin B, because they're kind of one round, are also kind of in a block together. So what will happen is you'll go, you'll be in a holding room, you'll go do a round, and then you go into another holding room. We'll wait for everyone to finish that round. Then we'll switch the two groups, and then you'll do it again. So if let's say you're first to go in for round robin A, you'll wait for the next 10 or 12 people to finish round robin A in the second holding room, and then you'll be first up again in round robin B. So that's how that works. Good question.
We had another question in the YouTube chat. What are some good ways to go about becoming familiar with the questions that will be asked through the different rounds?
Thoughts?
Yeah. So as far as the personal round type interviews, the questions that we have given as examples within the handbook. For the other rounds, I think it really comes down to knowing the hot topics and finding people that are experts within that field, finding resources that are expert within that field, and just familiarizing yourself with it, because most of the questions will revolve around the relevant information as it pertains to current events, which is really the purpose of those. So although we don't have particular question examples for those, I think that some of the best ways is one way that Brandon said was, just look at how an extemporaneous speaking, if you Google Iowa, or not even Iowa, if you just Google FFA extemporaneous speaking examples, you'll get a whole litany of examples for how that question is framed. It might not pertain to the particular topic area, but it'll give you a better idea of how we're going to frame the questions, and the nominating committee is going to frame the questions. I think that's one thing we kind of glossed over, actually. I keep saying we. So we never really talked about the makeup. We talked about the makeup of the student nominating committee. I'm going to kind of shift gears here. I think I answered your question for the most part. There's a student nominating committee composed of 12. But then there's what we call the adult and student coordinators. So myself, Brandon, Caleb are all student coordinators that will be working more directly with all of you. So we'll be the ones, giving you the welcome when you get to the enrichment center, being the ones that are more so in the holding room, those sorts of things. We're the ones doing this webinar. obviously we'll have any communication leading up to that needs to be distributed as well. But then there's also people that are student coordinators that are more so working directly with the nominating committee. Tell them who those people are, right?
Yeah,
so that will be Erica Beyer and Zach Hamilton. They'll be working more with the nominating committee and helping train them so that they can better evaluate you all. But then we also have a few other adult coordinators. Mr. Scott Smalley, who's with the Department of Ag Ed here at Iowa State. Mr. Jerry Lammers, who's has been in Iowa agricultural education sphere for literally 50 years, 52 years. So he is, Mr. Lammers is one of a kind and is just a great guy. And then there'll be others as well.
Yep.
They'll be popping in and out.
Assisted with the Department of Education.
Yes.
Kent, his last name I forget.
It's like Surfer. I would just pictured it. Sorry, Kent.
Yep. Good way. So
That was my kind of answer.
Yep.
But
and I had something to add on that.
Yeah.
We're talking about the different rounds. One thing that I think about is you don't want to practice interviews to the point where you have what are called canned answers. So let's say you practice these answers, or you practice interviewing over and over and over, and you get to a point where you're just robotically spitting out an answer to a question. What I like to think about when preparing for interviews that I know I'm going to have, so you've already been told what competencies you're going to be evaluated on. So maybe think about those competencies. Think about stories maybe that you remember in a specific circumstance, so you demonstrated what these competencies are. If you can think about those stories and bring those with you to the interview process, that's going to better help the nominating committee evaluate you on those. So think about those stories and how you want to kind of maybe display those in the rounds. So, other questions that we have so far? Anything else? All right.
I'm trying to check all the mediums and make sure I don't miss anything.
Text.
And if you inevitably, anytime I'm on a webinar and somebody asks for questions, I think of my question 5 minutes after they get off the webinar. And if that's the case, you can still go ahead and contact us. We'll answer those questions as best we can. If we think it's relevant information for the group, we'll make sure we post it in the Facebook group, get that emailed out. But if it's more individualized question, then we can just answer those on an individual basis too. So we might wait another 30 seconds or so here. But if there are any further questions, I think that's all the information we have for you all tonight.
Absolutely. We'll just thank you again for being interested in the state officer selection process, for submitting your application to run for state FFA office. It is something that if you are selected will become a big part of your life, even much after your term does expire. Tupper's been around for quite a while, so know that that you'll become part of a family. Just a larger FFA family, the way I kind of think about it. But we're excited to welcome new individuals come the end of state convention. So with that being said, I don't see any more questions. I'm checking my phone. One more thing. So I have a question about Facebook. One thing I talked about earlier, if you don't have Facebook, that's fine. Everything that I'm posting in there, I'm making sure that I duplicate an email out. One thing that I won't necessarily email out, but I think is a good opportunity to connect through Facebook, is just if you would maybe like to share rides on your way to and from state officer interviews. I think that's a possibility if you're near someone else that you know is running. Additionally, it's a good opportunity for you guys to be able to connect once you get into the hotel. But no worries if you don't have Facebook. Like I said, I'll make sure that we email those things out. So with that, thanks again for just one more time for joining us this evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you all this next Wednesday and Thursday. Awesome. Thanks so much.